Alright, so I guess this is the final review for me for Infidel. That's a pretty box cover. I don't know who the painting is, but certainly done in the style. And one of the things that I have to do is compare it to its prequel in the series, Men of Iron, because they are very different. The first thing that I noticed was the rules to Infidel are longer. They weigh in at like 4 pages more. There's some subtle little differences, but for the most part it's just a little bit more precise and a little bit less comprehensible to me. I found the first set of rules more enjoyable to read. But that said, the fact that move was not clearly defined in the original set, and that there are reactions to pieces moving next into your frontal arc, I definitely played it differently than was intended. So the clarifications do help bring the game to, you know, something where everybody's not going to have ambiguous and differing interpretations. Component-wise, it's about what you expect from a GMT game. It seems pretty nice to begin with. They've changed the format for the tables by putting the terrain effects charts inside the other tables. I don't know if I like this better. The original had a double-sided terrain effects chart and a double-sided combat chart, maybe for each player, I'm not sure. It's kind of difficult to page through something like that. I guess it's nice to have things that stay together or something. Maps, nice double-sided maps. I love double-sided maps. It means I get twice as many games, you know, or I'm saving a couple bucks or something. Counters, I had some problems with the counters. First of all, I think there are errors on some of the counters, and some of them are color mistagged. So, you know, that kind of slip up happens, but it's a shame when it does, and to me it's pretty obvious that, especially in the first scenario, things were miscolored. Then too, the choice of these two blues on different sides, I find that kind of, I mean, it's clearly not, they're not indistinguishable, but it makes it a little more difficult, and if somebody has more trouble than I do in telling colors apart, that could just be a deal breaker. Then again, that's generally the case in games. In terms of flavor, in terms of liking the game, I like this one a lot more than the original Men of Iron. To begin with, it is a topic that I find more exciting. Quite simply, the progression of the battles in the Crusades is something that really, really interested me, and that I knew a little bit more about, maybe. Although Men of Iron picked some pretty high, visibility battles as well. And Infidel left out a lot of battles from the Crusading era, and there's definitely room to add a lot more battles into this, just covering just in the Crusading era. Another nice thing about it is, because it focuses, see, the two games looked at things from a different perspective. Men of Iron takes a look at the growth of the importance of infantry by picking out key battles where infantry, probably in a good static position with terrain to help them beat, and maybe rain and whatever, beat back, what was viewed as the ultimate weapon of the time, the mounted knight. And certainly that becomes more and more common as time goes on, and eventually the Mounted Knight disappears because of it. So Men of Iron focused on battles where, first of all, there weren't many battles between infantry and infantry, but battles where the knights faced defeat at the hands of foot soldiers. Most of those battles were absolute blowouts. And on the other side, if you wanted to show, and they did in, Bannockburn, right? Yeah, I think Bannockburn's the one. They show a more traditional, the infantry just getting wiped out by the Mounted Knight. But there wasn't any in between. You couldn't field a ground army and face knights and it comes out kind of close. That's just not going to happen. And the situational is usually pretty extreme. Now, I saw some of those blowouts go the other way, which I found kind of amusing, as blowouts, because the system really does, like great battles of history, and like the historical precedent it's based on, it favors, extreme results in the battlefield. Infidel, on the other hand, is looking at two very different tactical systems facing one another over a period of time. So Men of Iron picks specific battles that were blowouts. Infidel picks the interesting battles of the era in the Crusader operations. Not all of them, maybe not even the most interesting, but it picks a selection of what are good battles. Now, if you picked from the Men of Iron series the same kind of, take a slice of time, an era, whatever, and just look for the best, most interesting battles there, I think you would find it's also a more engaging game. But then there's the topic, and quite simply, other than the fact that you have Crécy and Poitiers and Agincourt, if you print it out, and these battles of such importance in Men of Iron, overall, though, I would say there's probably more public interest in more balanced battles. What I'm thinking here is, other than these very key battles, and Men of Iron does a great job of picking these, although it does have a couple of kind of iffy ones. Nahara is kind of, I think, chosen more for the situation than for its fame, and it makes it one of the more interesting battles. But in Infidel, you're picking some pretty key battles that happened, as well as ones that play out kind of nicely, fairly closely. There's always a serious bias in these, according to the designer. I got a problem with it, though, or I've got a problem that I expressed through the game, which is that, like Cav, maybe I'm just kind of slow. I talk on the boards, and other people seem to have the same issue. I don't know the solution to it. I mean, the final scenario that I played, even there, ultimately much weaker like Cav, -2s to the die rolls on their archery, barely can hit a knight at all, and they still did quite a bit. They still did about as much harassment as I think they ever did. So I'm wondering if they may be overpowered in this game for what the effect they really had. Because I remember stories of marches in the First Crusade where Crusaders were wearing heavy padding and getting peppered with arrows and suffered no casualties from the arrows. They suffered from heat stroke. But I'm just not sure that I buy that a force is necessarily going to... And I'm not saying these are deaths or whatever, I'm just not sure that the disruption that they provided was uniformly anywhere near what it's portrayed in the game. And I just don't know how reasonable that ends up being. But it's a fun game. Like I said, it's got a couple component issues with the counters that I think have a definite problem. But it's it's sort of this. The whole series, all 2 games of it, is very much based on the great battles of history, but it is so much lighter, and it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, they cut away so many rules, so many different things, the turn sequence even, but managed to keep not just the flavor of the battles, but almost the effect of the game. It's as if there's a lot of little stuff you're doing in Great Battles of History, fiddling with counters and stacking and unstacking and this, that, and the other, that, you can cut that all away and you still come up with almost the same results or same kind of game without all of that. And that's kind of neat. Now, personally, I would rather, and obviously with all the Great Battles of History games I've been picking up, I've made a commitment. I would rather play a heavier, more detailed game. Now, I think it's great that GMT is putting out the Great Battles of History Light, which I have no ideas about, but I think it's probably streamlined in the same sort of way. Although I wonder if you can do that across all eras. Of course, Great Battles of History and this, wow, same idea. They're called series. There's a lot of similarity, but they're not like series like, say, the OCS. I mean, you're not sharing a majority of the rules in one book and transferring it to the next. I look at the rule books from different ones, and the same basic framework is there, but that's like, saying that the Avalon Hill Classics are a series. There's definitely a familial relationship, but it's more, I would say, more like the differences between, say, different XX games or different Britannia-based games. It's more of a family-based difference than, say, a series-based difference. When I look at the Battles of the Age of Reason games, when I look at my CWB series, I've got a series there. I know the rules are almost exactly the same from game to game. There's a couple pages of this is what's different in the CWB ones. In OCS, there's usually quite a bit more. This reminds me more of trying to call the Zucker family of games, the Operational Napoleonics, a series. It really isn't. And this isn't either. And this is no more a series. So this is almost as much part of the Great Battles of History, I would say, as it is its own series. And I would also say Musket of Pike is part of the Great Battles of History in its own way. They share so much between them that while there are some little differences, overall, these are all based on that same idea of, rolling to keep control of the game. Well, Musket and Pike's a little different because you do have handoffs, I guess. But just this sort of, the players control the order of activations, etc., to a large extent. I find that refreshing, interesting, good enough that I want to play these games in addition to all their detail, especially the GPOH ones. But I think the biggest thing for me is, oh look, somebody's actually doing these games right. I mean, I've seen some old medieval games from SPI's era, and they were okay, but they just don't give the feel the way these do. They don't give the flavor, and they don't. And as to the Great Battles of History stuff or the Musket and Pike, there was just nothing out there that gave that flavor. These, because they're so light, are not that far different from, say, SPI's Agincourt, Black Prince, Suliban. Number of those games that I've played. All right, I guess that's enough chattering.